Let's officially get started. We have an hour together and we have so much we want to share with you. So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Eluna Community Conversation, Support for Survivors of Suicide. My name is Bethany Gardner, and I work on the Eluna team as Director of Bereavement Programs. And with me is our presenter, Stephanie Heitkemper, who I'll introduce more in just a bit. And we want to begin by saying thank you to the Peter DeGeorge Family Foundation and Holly Hartman for their support that made today's webinar possible. A primary part of my role as Director of Bereavement Programs is supporting our national Camp Erin network. So to any of our parents and guardians of Camp Erin campers who joined today, it was such an honor to support your campers at Camp Erin, and we're just so grateful you're here. And if you want to give a shout out to you or your camper for being amazing, please do so in the chat. We'd love to know you're here. And welcome also to the many other guardians and parents, family members, friends, volunteers, support professionals, and other allies of youth who are with us today. Thank you for joining to help reduce the stigma and isolation faced by folks grieving after a suicide. It's really important work, and we're so happy to create community around this effort. For those of you who are just meeting Eluna, our mission is to support children and families impacted by grief or addiction. And we offer 2 free peer support programs we want to make sure you know about. The first is Camp Erin, a national network of grief support camp programs for youth who are grieving the death of someone significant in their lives. And the second is Camp Mariposa, a national addiction prevention and mentoring program for youth affected by substance use of a family member. And our third program is the Eluna Resource Center, which is available to everyone, and it provides online and local resources and personalized support. And this slide that you see right now shares contact information for Molly Hassan, the director of the Resource Center. And there's also a link there to visit the Resource Center, and Molly is going to share those links in the chat for you, and you'll also receive a copy of this slide deck following the program so you can access resources that way as well. And we really invite you to reach out at any time we can be of help, either for your family or as you support others. So today we are going to talk about grief and supporting grieving youth after a suicide death. And care provided to survivors of suicide is often called postvention. And suicide postvention and prevention work, they go hand in hand because people who are grieving a suicide death can be at higher risk for suicide. So there's going to be a point in our presentation today where we're going to transition to resources for suicide prevention. And we wanted, for those of you who joined who are grieving, if this doesn't feel like the right time for you to learn or hear this information, we just give you full freedom to take good care of yourself and sign off the webinar at any point. And all attendees will be provided a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar and all of the resources shared, and you can return to it at any time. So I have just a couple more housekeeping items, and then I get to hand it over to Stephanie. So as I said before, this is going to be recorded. We wanted it to be available as a resource after for you, or maybe there's a teacher or a coach in your life that would benefit from learning how better to support your youth. So the link will be provided to you to share. And we don't have cameras on for all attendees, but we want to create community together. So please use the chat for conversation and comments. And that is hosted by our Resource Center Director, again, Molly Hassan. She's going to be taking care of you in the chat section. And at the end of our gathering, we will stop recording for a Q&A session. So throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the Zoom screen. It says Q&A, and it has 2 little speech bubbles to submit questions for Stephanie to answer during our Q&A time. So finally, I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Stephanie Heitkemper. Stephanie specializes in working with children and families around change, including grief, trauma, and transition. She's the owner of Resilient Minds Counseling that serves the Denver metro area. where she helps children and families through play and creative expression and bibliotherapy. And I think you can see a lot of that represented in the beautiful bookshelves behind Stephanie. Stephanie is also a volunteer with Camp Bear in Denver, and she's the camp therapist for Camp JoJo, a program that supports teens who have been impacted by a suicide. So Stephanie, we're just so grateful to learn with you today, and I'm going to hand the floor over to you now.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Bethany. So I am human, just like everyone here, and I have encountered some tech issues tonight. So we're going to take a little pivot, but I thought it would be really important as we enter into this conversation tonight. Maybe we just take a moment to rest, to breathe in, let today's worries go. Maybe you, like me, have encountered some tech troubles breathing in and breathing out. Bethany mentioned taking care of yourself with a glass of water. I also suggest printing the mandala that was mentioned in the chat so that you can color. It's noted that if you color a repeating pattern, it reduces anxiety. At any point, if this conversation becomes too heavy, I invite you to take a walk, to turn me down. I don't have to be at volume number 10. I can be at volume number 3 in the background, or perhaps even muted. Please know that this is recorded and it's here as a resource for you and your family, as well as your community. I would like to begin by saying thank you to the Peter DeGeorge Family Foundation for supporting tonight's conversation. Thank you. Just a general disclaimer that this presentation is to be helpful, but is not a substitute for therapy. And if you're in need of extra support, please use the resources listed in this presentation or use your local emergency room. Grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity, the price you pay for love. And the only cure for grief is to grieve. This quote is from Earl Grolman. It's by far one of my favorites. And it's important to me that I introduce you to the reason that I'm passionate about my work. I'd like you to meet my friend Jessie. It's important that we say their name, that we talk about the people who have impacted our lives, left footprints on our heart. And my hope had been that we would be able to text it and have this beautiful word cloud, but sometimes technology gets in the way. So this evening, as an attempt to build community and connect us so that we don't feel like we're far away from each other, I invite you to type into the chat the name of the person that you're carrying close to your heart or honoring or thinking about this evening. I'll give you all a moment to do this now. I can see the names popping up. I can't read them all, but I can see the growing tally. It's important that we say their name, that we honor those that have left impacts in our life. Thank you for being willing to participate in the chat section. Please know, just like camp, it's challenged by choice, only if you feel comfortable. Tonight, there's a lot of information. And guess what? You don't have to take it all in at once. And in fact, I don't want you to take it all in at once, but rather sit back, take the pieces that your heart needs tonight, or that your community needs, or that your children need, or that you need as a guardian supporting a grieving child or children. But my goal is that we can increase comfort around saying the word suicide and creating an explanation based on age. This will evolve as your children or the children in your lives get older. Just talking about some basic brain development. I have a really cool slide that I love that I hope will help you keep in mind, that you will keep in mind as we move forward in talking about grief and impacts and stressors and how our grief changes over time. That we'll explore risk factors and protective factors. There's an acronym called ALERT, and I hope that this is something that you can keep in your mind if you are ever presented with somebody with active ideation, along with ways to navigate support and the ways that our support may change and evolve over time. It's important that tonight we begin to change our language, that we honor the people in our lives and our communities who have died by suicide, but we avoid saying things such as committed and instead use the term died by suicide, or even perhaps ended his or her life. When we change our language, we give ourselves permission to talk about the person who died, to talk about them, to talk about their favorite movie, their favorite snack, the best vacation you ever encountered with them, and even your hopes or dreams. We as a community are moving away from saying things like failed or successful attempts. We don't want to rate attempts. We don't want to put that language out there. And so we may just use the simple language of saying a death by suicide or a suicide attempt. It's important that today we begin to change our language so that we can use this, as Bethany said, for prevention. I spent some time thinking about all of you who will come from near and far tonight to be a part of this conversation. And my hope is that this presentation can be a resource for you. Please note that all of the links provided in this presentation tonight are active as of tonight, May 18th, always subject to change. They are not my links, but that we will be able to give those hyperlinks to you. So the first one that says check for your local area specific telephone number. Many states have their own crisis and text number and hotline number. So that is a resource that seems to be updated fairly regularly across the United States. So thank you to the team behind the scenes who manages that list so that our communities feel heard and seen. The second hyperlink is about our local crisis support centers. And so those are different ways that you can be involved or know where they are in your community or rally donations or support, whatever your heart feels. But I think it's important that you know where they are. And lastly, if you're a Colorado resident like me, and maybe perhaps missing the sunshine today, I went ahead and I put the Colorado state number out there, as well as the text number. So you don't have to click the link, Colorado residents, I did that for you. But I wanted you to have access to these because part of talking about suicide and talking about how to support our kids is about knowing resources that can help them. The campaign on the left side of your screen came from Colorado, and it's called it Below the Surface. And I hope that tonight we are able to talk about what's on the top of the surface, but as well as what's under the surface in not only our own grief journeys, but our prevention in our communities and families. So I mentioned we were going to talk about the brain, and there's so many emotions that go on when we have experienced the death of a suicide. Anger, frustration, feeling nervous, hurt, even embarrassed by this potential stigma, feeling sad and lonely, traumatized, insecure, pain. Sometimes our kids, even our tiniest kids and our oldest kids, do such an amazing job of only showing us just the tip of the iceberg. And underneath all of these raw, heavy feelings sit alone. What we know is that these are constantly developing, right? So when your child was little, and if you can remember kind of floating back to those sleepless nights with a crying baby, desperately wanting them to settle, and you're breathing and you're like, oh, my laundry list is so long and I have so much to do. And the minute that you said, never mind, the laundry list doesn't matter, and I can be here with you, baby, and you started to breathe and you started to relax and you started to feel calm and secure in your emotions, most likely your baby also started to relax and feel calm, and hopefully they started to get a little sleepy. When we as adults are honest with our emotions, we can better support our children. It's important that we know that Their right side of the brain, where we see all of their emotions, develops before their left side, right? Which then helps them with language and judgment. As our brain develops, our behaviors change. And so when we talk about suicide loss, it's important that we talk about it in an age appropriate manner for our children. So I'd like to think about it like building a house. I don't know what your area in town looks like, but around here, the houses are going up nonstop. And every day they look a little bit different. Some um, seem to go up faster than others, some have challenges. It's kind of like growing. So when we think about our oldest children, our adolescents, they have a framework, right? And our little kids, we are building a foundation. So we're constantly building our house. So when I think about talking about a suicide loss, whether it be in your own family or in your community, I think about age appropriate language. I think about for those that are young and just at the foundation, thinking that less is more, right? The goal of a foundation is just that it's even, right? It's level. That the message from you is the same as your sister's message to them and your neighbor's message, keeping it short and simple. That as the steady adult or the adult brain that's like a fully developed house with drywall, that you are calm and anchored in repeating the same message. Even if it means it's the message in the Costco line, it's the message at the kiss and ride, it's the message before bed. Using language that lets them know that they're okay and that they're safe. We're going to talk about how children really grow and develop in play. And it's important to me that I help support you as guardians, maybe even camp facilitators in play, right? And talking more about play. As we transition into our adolescence, I notice that their house has a little bit more framework, more than a foundation. And so this reminds me that it's starting to look like a house, but it's not complete. The roof is open. It also looks like it still has a lot of work to be done. So the information that we give to them may be a little bit more than our younger children. But I encourage you to continue to go with less is more. Because when our brain endures hearing such big words, such as a suicide loss, we might be taken back to being about the age of a child in their foundation, right? That younger child, like, who am I? And is the world okay? Is it safe? How much can I do? So even though they may be tall and big and grown, maybe even have facial hair, or look and sound like an adult, it's okay to ease into the conversation with the adolescents, right? Slowly and gradually adding more information to their knowledge base. Again, making sure that those in your community and those in your family use the same language and that they also share the same message. And as our brain continues to develop, it is like a house with drywall and a roof. And over time, we may add more details to that home, like flower gardens or pictures on the wall, maybe even a paved driveway. And when I think about those details, I think about the details in that person's life, things that maybe we weren't privy to knowing when our house was being built, maybe past struggles of mental health, previous attempts, pain, or trauma. And that's okay. I want you to know as adults that you are not lying to your children, that you are dosing them with age appropriate information. I think it's important that as you build your family's house of information, that you talk about this metaphor. You talk about the changes that come as you grow and develop and understand what it means to experience the death of somebody you care and love by suicide. It is also so important that we talk about all of the feelings, even the feelings of this conversation. I am wondering right now if some of you may feel confused. Some may feel hopeful, thinking about the house metaphor. Some may feel worried, perhaps feeling like you didn't give enough information or gave too much information. Please note that this is just a tool to help you. I am confident that you did a great job in supporting your children, and that this resource will continue to help you support your child or children. It's okay if sometimes the feelings that we feel may not be the ones that people think that we should feel. Maybe sometimes after the death of somebody, we feel loved because we can think about their memories and the positive impact they left on our life. I encourage you all to think about this feelings list. Think about your own family's feeling list. I encourage you when you are supporting your child to think about what you are feeling. So I invite you to sit back in your chair, take a drink of your drink, breathe in and breathe out, and think about what your body is feeling in this moment. If you're feeling boredom, you could say something like, I'm feeling bored because this is information I've heard before. Or if you're feeling hopeful, you may say, I feel hopeful because this will grow the conversation in my community. It's important that we think about building our house and building our foundation around talking about suicide death by going from our right side of our brain with our feelings to our left side of logic, right? Think about the logic of being those beams and drywall. Those details come later. So I encourage you to take a screenshot of this or to save the PDF tomorrow and begin the conversation about trusting what's going on in your body by what you're feeling and what you'd like to know on the logic. I was doing some research the other week talking about the idea of feeling flooded in emotion. It seems that often grief and fear leave many feeling so flooded. And what I learned is that when our body feels flooded by emotion, it often takes a minimum of 20 minutes to re-regulate. This is something that we cannot control. It occurs in our nervous system. It's a natural response. And often, when we talk about suicide, we're not only experiencing grief, but we're often experiencing fear, fear of the unknown, questions, fear of the questions in our community, fear of the questions we didn't know or may learn in the coming days. And this may leave us feeling overwhelmed emotionally. I encourage you, if you feel flooded, to take a breath in and to take a breath out, preferably a short breath in and a long exhale, to color in your mandala, to take a drink of tea, to name that feeling and then the logic, and to bear witness to the 20 minutes, to say, hey, body and brain, I'm worthy of this. My child is worthy of this. They're feeling so many emotions, I can't rush them right now. I can just sit with them. I can offer them a hot cup of hot cocoa or tea. Many kids love sparkling water now. I mentioned a little while ago when I was talking about the house that the foundation is kind of our youngest people, right? Our little people. Maybe I'm thinking, oh, toddlers through 5th or 6th grade. And I want you to know that play is an important element of being a child. It is their language. It's the way they express themselves. It's the way they learn and make sense of a story. It's common in my work as a play therapist that when children experience the death of somebody they love by suicide, they often replay the situation, the way they heard the story, what they remember from before the death, what they hope will happen. This is their attempt of making sense, to understand and normalize what has changed in their world. Play is part of emotional wellness, right? It's the way of letting go. It's the way of working through those fears, the stresses, the worries, and the unknowns. I've witnessed kids playing in the sand tray many times about going to school and people saying terrible things to them. Even though that hasn't happened, they're just preparing themselves if somebody doesn't understand. Where other times I've seen kids just want to play out the positive emotions. Please know that both are healthy and important in the process of understanding the death of somebody in their life by suicide. Play lets us work on attachment. Our attachment changes when somebody we love dies. They may have been the person who made the peanut butter and jelly sandwich the best and remembered to cut off the crust and had a special tuck in bedtime routine. And now your child's wondering if lunch will taste the same or if the tuck in at night will be the same. It's a way that they may learn empathy and working through their family dynamics. Play is also often pretty wild, right? And they're kind of trying to figure out what's going on in their body. Wait, hold on, my heart is racing. And other times my feet are bouncing. Oh, and if I stand on one leg and then hop to the other one and clap 10 times and take a drink of water, I no longer feel scared. They're trying it on. They're finding their coping skills. Please remember that children dose themselves. Our youngest children dose themselves, and even our teens dose themselves. So you may talk about these heavy parts of the loss, the things that weigh hard on an adult brain, and your child may take the information and then run with it, and then come back and ask some more questions. Think about this play cycle by Dr. Parson. Think about maybe where your child is, right? That they got to express themselves, and now they're working out the stress. And then they need a hug because they want to attach to you and they want to know that they're safe and that you're safe. And then they're problem solving. Like, hey, mom, I'm going to cook dinner, or I'm going to help you grocery shop because I know you hate cleaning raw chicken, right? Meet them where they are. Play is important. I use this a lot. And sometimes people are like, Stephanie, this is so weird. These people with just their undergarments on and all of their body parts. But when we experience a death, we often, as young children, wonder if we are going to die too, or if we are going to be with the person who died. And so it's important to talk about how we're surviving. How is our heart beating? Is it beating fast? Is it beating slow? How are our lungs breathing? Does it hurt or feel like an elephant or even a dragon? Have any of you read My Big Dumb Invisible Dragon? One of the children says it feels like the dragon's on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe, right? That would be a way that his lungs are surviving. The breath is harder to take. Sometimes our elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, and high schoolers, and even the college students that I work with, talk about how their brain just doesn't feel the same, how they know the content of the test and they know how to take a test and they know all the important parts, but they just can't remember how to put the answers down on paper, right? Maybe you've seen increased colds, bladder infections, because they've forgotten to go to the bathroom. It's important that you check in with your children of all ages about how they're surviving, how they're using their body to survive. How do their eyes feel? How do your eyes feel? Tonight, my eyes feel tired, so I wore my glasses. Sometimes they don't feel tired, and I don't have to wear them. That's okay. Grief changes us. Sometimes we need our glasses. Sometimes our teeth are sensitive just because we've gone through so many changes. Taking play, taking how we're surviving, taking the foundation of the house, it's important that we also think about the impact that your children may face at school. This slide has lots of green hyperlinks. That's intentional. I wanted you to know that the conversation doesn't stop here tonight, and that often your children may need additional support at school. These hyperlinks have many different programs to educate people to support them in the school setting. So More Than Sad is from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, where they are currently doing web-based training to support high school students and teachers and parents. Signs of Suicide was designed for middle school and high school students. Sources of Strength, which we'll talk about today, comes from Colorado and actually includes elementary school. And I have used it with my youngest of youngest kids and my oldest of oldest adults. And so I thought I'd bring it to you today to talk about it. The Trevor Project supports LGBTQ youth, and they have many different platforms, such as a free phone number, chat number, text space, and Active Minds is for young adults in college. So please know that these will come out to you tomorrow, and there will be an additional resource so that you recognize that you are not alone and that your children are not alone, even when they go to school. This is a digital sand tray. I'm not sure if you all ever had a sandbox as children. Remember sitting outside, maybe sitting a little too long and getting a little sun on your shoulders, or digging in the dirt. It's so important to play. COVID really sped this process up. This is a digital sandbox that was created for my practice, and I'd like to encourage you all to be able to use this digital sandbox. So there's a hyperlink, and sandboxes are so important, or sand trays, whatever you'd like to call them tonight, to tell our story. And you can explore your own grief as an adult because play is important. It allows you to put one foot into the story and one foot out. It may even be a safe way for you to talk about more pieces of the story with your children. On the left side are just some general prompts to this story. I intentionally, around the flowers, left the digital box. I hope you all can see this box that has all the little squares. So when you click an icon, and you get to pick your sand, by the way, and it drops into the box, you get to change the shape and direction based on the box around it. Once it's set, it will go away. Please know that you can save them to your computer. I don't have them. They are all yours. I don't get a copy of them. I won't be looking at your sand tray, but I encourage you to potentially use it as a modality to explore those emotions, the feelings, the changes in your house, the changes in your community, your hopes and dreams for support. I'd like to prepare you to begin to transition this evening into talking about how to prevent a death by suicide, how to recognize warning signs, how to talk about risk factors and protective factors. And so at this point in the conversation, as Bethany mentioned, if this is not where you need to be and your heart cannot be there tonight, I support you. I am so honored that you chose to spend your Tuesday night with me. And I'd love for you to take a break and potentially mute me or turn down my volume a little bit. This is a sensitive subject, one near and dear to my heart. There are many risk factors and protective factors, and they vary based on our society, our community, our relationships, our personality, our household dynamics. Risk factors are the variables that are increased when somebody dies by suicide, that are more common. And protective factors are the factors that hold people back from dying, right? Support them. I think about them as the layers of the onion, because sometimes they're close to each other. Before we begin, I'd like to talk to you for just a brief second about non-suicidal self-injury. As a children's therapist, I often see this in my office. Parents come and they're so nervous because of their own grief journey, nervous because of their own family's trauma. And they're saying like, oh no, Stephanie, oh no, my child is cutting and they have been burning themselves or pinching. I'd like you to explore this. And tonight, I hope this conversation makes it easy for you to do so. I'd like you to talk about ways to support your child. Coloring a mandala makes it easier when we talk about it. Exercising, following a new recipe, trying something new. I would also like you to be honest and gentle and ask their intent. Sometimes in grief, our pain is so heavy and we want to release it. And children and young adults often feel that cutting and feeling the pain can help them further release it, but do not have an intent to die. Remember that children learn more from what you are than what you teach, and how you handle these situations in supporting your child, whether it's positive or negative stress, can help us work through the problem. So going back to that feelings chart and thinking, I'm feeling nervous and I need to write down all my questions. You can do so. It's important. Stressors for children can include academic, personal, social, family, and environmental. Tonight, I want to introduce you to the term alert. created by Kara Crosswhite Brindle. This acronym can help us explore those who have ideations regarding suicide. A stands for ask, L stands for listen, E for engage, which is those protective factors, R, respond, and T, task to stay connected so that we're not alone. Much like the non-suicidal ideation self-harm, it's important to be direct and honest, and sometimes this can be the hardest part for parents. But if you take a moment to take a breath in and a breath out and use yourself as the anchor, and you are honest and heartfelt by saying, I'm wondering, have you been thinking about killing yourself or trying to die? You can unlock a conversation with your children or with those in your life who may be struggling. You can empathize. That sounds really tough. How long have you been feeling this way? How long have the feelings been lasting? How do you control them? How can you not control them? You may ask some questions. It is okay to ask about suicide. It does not put the idea in somebody's head. That's a myth. The next one is to listen for those risk factors. Has your child or the person in your community been really agitated, unable to sleep, anxiety 24/7? You've noticed that they've started to dabble in substance use or inquire about substance use, that they're cutting off from people that they once loved and found joy in being around. They may seem angrier. Their behavior may seem high risk, and you may be not able to predict their moods. These are risk factors. It's important that we explore them, that we listen for them. As a parent, when you support a child, I would encourage that you keep a notebook and you jot these down so that you can see the risk factors. While you're looking for risk factors, begin to engage the protective factors, the things that those people love, like their academics or their artistic abilities. What does it look like if it's in your budget to take a trip to Michael's and sit down and color next to them? What does it look like to work with a counselor around solving conflict that they're passionate about or need some support around? Who do they love? Do they have a mentor in your family? Somebody that connects to them and gets them? Is there a safe person at school they'd like to talk to? What would it be like if you supported them in a peer group? Is there somebody in your spiritual world that can support them or a positive role model? One way that I love to engage protective factors is by looking at the sources of strength wheel, the mental health, family support, positive friends, mentors, healthy activities, generosity, spirituality, and physical health. I have found great success in helping kids and adults write these down and keep them in their wallet. Often I'll ask if I can write them a card too, so they can keep their card in their cell phone or they can keep their card in their wallet. Two, in my mind, is better than one. It's important that in our own grief journey, we look at our own protective factors. What is our mental health like? Our family support, our friends, our mentors? Have any of these changed? Do we have expectations that aren't the same anymore? Grief changes relationships and our support. But by checking in with your sources of strength, I hope that you can engage those that you need most. As mentioned a moment ago, I loved the note card idea or the journal. On the Sources of Strength website, they even have this super cool board game with activities. You can do it in an interactive word cloud, painting rocks, or even going on a nature walk. It's important that you have safety measures. Coming from the camp world, one of the things that we do at Camp JoJo is we always have everybody have a safety plan and safety measures. And it's important that we talk about these in our own household. Grief changes the way we cope, the way we feel, the way we think. even what we hope for in the future. It's important and it's a healthy conversation to recognize triggers, things that make us stressed. What are our coping skills? What takes them off the heavy thought? What are external coping skills? What are the things you need somebody else to help you with? Who supports you? For parents, I love when your children write these down because then you always have that person's telephone number. And I don't know about you, but I haven't memorized a telephone number in a long time. So having them down makes it easier. Thinking about their professional resources, therapists, doctors, even a crisis center where they can call and talk to somebody if they feel alone at night. It's a good thing to always remind your child and those in your life that they matter, they are worthy, and there are people out there who love them so much and want to support them. Step 6 is about keeping items that they may use to harm themselves out of their reach. And step 7 is 2 or 3 things that they can go to or be with around bringing hope. T, the final letter in alert, is about staying connected. What can you do to help? Think coping skills, resources, and activities. Are you a journaler? Do you like to draw instead of journaling? Do you need a journal that has prompts in it versus a blank journal? Who are 3 people that support you? How has your support changed? It's important that as a supporter and a caregiver that you also check in with yourself around your mental capacity, your physical health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. I found this as I was preparing for this presentation on glitter and grief. And it was a name tag, and it says, "Hello, I'm grieving because I miss everything. Everything I didn't want to do, life without you." Sometimes support changes when we have been impacted by a suicide death. How do we support our kids when our friends don't seem to be the same friends anymore, or their friends don't seem to be the same friends? What happens if half our household finds support in the activities that we no longer find support in? I encourage you to think about your support system and think about what you need in your support system, to be honest with yourself, to think about what your children need, to think about what you don't need. Sometimes the very way people think they're helping us, actually, it isn't helpful. It feels harmful, or it makes us think less about ourselves or feel pain in ways that we don't want to feel. It's important to speak up, to talk about it, to say their name, and to remind those around you that their support is important. But also, you honoring the person in your life who died is also important. That your grief will change over time, but it will never go away. And as you support growing children, their grief will change over time. Their friends may change, their hobbies may change, their interests, their academic skills or successes may change. That's okay. Grief changes us. So, what is your role as we begin to wrap up? It's to speak up, it's to ask direct questions, to talk about those moods and those big feelings and changes in motivation and attitude. Adolescence can be rough, but it's important that you name it, that you talk about it. It's important that you talk about it even with your younger children. You seem really cranky. The last couple of days, ever since you went to baseball, you haven't been yourself. It's making me feel sad. What's been going on? You may find that it was really hard to go and see all the moms in the stand and not have a mom in the stand. Be direct, speak up. It's important. Engage in an active plan, stay calm, remind them how brave they are, reduce the stressors. Crisis behavior can look many different ways, but please know that you are not alone. Please call your local emergency room, call 911 or the prevention hotline, and remind them if you are in this situation that you are not leaving them alone. All it takes is one caring and compassionate adult to take notice and start the conversation. This is part of AFSP's campaign for 2025 to reduce the rates of suicide. You are a caring and compassionate person. You are taking notice. You can start the conversation even in your grief. When you stand and share your story in an empowering way, your story will heal you and your story will heal someone else. Please never forget that. Again, a special thanks to the Peter DeGeorge Family Foundation for supporting tonight's conversation. Thank you.